This is Book 3 in my Ethereal Hollywood story series. As with the others, they are primarily audio books. The images serve a storyboard function, providing visuals synced to the audio to give a general pictorial reference to the content. The following notes apply to all the stories. Busby Berkeley's Dream Team. Book 3 of the Ethereal Hollywood series. By Arnold Kalnitsky. Preface. Ethereal Hollywood is a world reconfigured from the golden age of Hollywood, where the legendary stars are not just memories, but immortal archetypes, still living in their own parallel alternative reality. Familiar history is not duplicated but flexible and constantly revisioning itself along diverse pathways. Time and space are also more fluid and less binding. And what has been called magic works in odd and unusual ways, producing scenarios from the silly to the surreal. And since these stories are in an alternative world dimension, there are variances from real-world facts, such as the relationship between characters, studios, events. This is a fluid world where history flows in unexpected directions. The janitor paused his mopping, squinting at the blueprint unfurled across Busby Berkeley's empty desk. It looked like a mad spider had spun a web after swallowing a bottle of ink. He traced a spiral with his calloused thumb. Hell of a lot of floor space for this one, he muttered to the silent office. The scent of stale coffee and cigar smoke clung to the velvet curtains. Outside, a delivery truck backfired. The sudden noise made him jump, his mop handle clattering against a brass spittoon. He steadied himself, wiping sweat from his brow with a frayed sleeve. Through the window, the first gray light of dawn touched the soundstage roofs. He noticed a single, perfect red lipstick stain on the edge of Berkeley's teacup. It glistened faintly under the desk lamp. His gaze drifted back to the blueprint's dizzying curves and impossible angles. Who cleaned up after that kind of magic? He sighed, the sound loud in the quiet room. The mop water sloshed as he pushed the bucket toward the door. His worn shoes squeaked on the polished marble, leaving faint, damp tracks that vanished almost instantly. He didn't look back at the desk. Outside, the studio lot was waking. A low hum built in the distance, the generators powering up, the first trucks rumbling toward the commissary. He saw the silhouette of a figure against the paling sky, walking with quick, precise steps toward stage 3. Busby Berkeley, already moving before the sun properly rose, his coat flapping like a flag. The janitor paused, leaning on his mop handle, watching the man disappear into the cavernous dark of the soundstage door. Inside stage 3, the air was thick with sawdust and anticipation. Berkeley stood in the center of the vast, empty floor, his head tilted back as he stared at the rigging high above. He could almost see it. 100 girls descending on silver wires, their sequins catching the Klieg lights, forming a living, breathing spiral that would make audiences gasp. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, scribbling furiously, waterfall of legs. Start slow. Build to whirlpool. A door slammed open at the far end. Toby Wing strode in, her heels clicking like castanets on the wooden floor. She carried a thick binder under one arm. Busby, she called, her voice echoing. The costume sketches. The beating alone will bankrupt a small country. She stopped before him, flipping open the binder to reveal a sketch of a dancer in little more than strategically placed rhinestones and feathers. Suggestive enough for you. Her eyebrow arched. Berkeley's eyes narrowed, not at the sketch, but at the empty space above them where his vision would hang. Not yet, he murmured. Make the feathers move with them. Make it breathe. Outside, the murmur of voices grew. Dick Powell arrived first, humming a bar from his latest number, his hands shoved deep in his trench coat pockets. He paused at the stage door, squinting into the gloom. Rehearsal called for dawn now, Busby. He called out, his voice bouncing off the rafters. Before Berkeley could answer, the sharp staccato of James Cagney's tap shoes approached from the corridor. Dawn. Kid stuff, Cagney barked, already loosening his tie. I was born ready. He slapped Powell's shoulder, a grin splitting his face. A ripple of perfume announced the women. Ruby Keeler entered with Joan Blondell, their heads bent together in laughter that cut through the sawdust haze. Behind them, Judy Garland's small frame was nearly swallowed by Esther Williams's confident stride. "Heard you're planning to drown us, Busby," Williams called, her voice cool and amused. Berkeley didn't look down. "Not drown," he corrected, his finger tracing an invisible arc in the air. "Float. Like constellations." Garland's gaze followed his gesture, her eyes wide. "Constellations don't kick," she whispered, but a smile played on her lips. The cavernous stage door framed Jack Warner and Louis B. Mayer suddenly, their silhouettes sharp against the morning light. They had agreed to co-produce Berkeley's latest spectacle, permitting the talent from their studios along with others, to participate in what Berkeley said would be his ultimate production. The culmination of his career. Warner clutched a cigar, Mayer a leather portfolio. They stopped just inside, surveying the gathering talent and the vast, empty space. Warner's voice, low and gravelly, carried easily. "All right, Berkeley. Show us where the mountain of money goes." Mayer simply nodded, his expression unreadable. Berkeley finally lowered his hand. He turned slowly, a spark igniting in his eyes. "Gentlemen," he said, sweeping his arm wide to encompass the void. "Right here. It starts with falling stars." A collective murmur rose as Berkeley snatched a rolled-up blueprint from Toby Wing's binder. He unfurled it on the dusty floor with a flourish. Heads craned. Powell, Cagney, Blondell, Garland, Williams, all crowding around the intricate web of lines and angles. It depicted dancers suspended in impossible formations, mirrored floors reflecting kaleidoscopic patterns, water tanks shimmering beneath platforms. "The descent," Berkeley explained, his finger tracing a dizzying spiral. "Not wires. Silver ribbons. Fluid. Like mercury." Esther Williams leaned closer, her brow furrowed. "And the splash zone?" she asked dryly. Berkeley grinned. "Contained. And spectacular." A sharp, rhythmic thumping cut through the quiet concentration. James Cagney had wandered off, unable to stand still. He was hammering out a complex tap sequence on a bare section of floorboards, his body coiled with restless energy. Tap tap tappity tap thud. The sound echoed, sharp and alive. Dick Powell watched, then softly began to hum a counter melody, his tenor tone weaving around the staccato beats. It was raw, unplanned, but instantly captivating, the pulse of the city meeting the rhythm of the dance. Joan Blondell nudged Ruby Keeler. "Hear that?" she whispered. "Gold." Al Jolson burst through the stage door, his voice a cannonade before he was fully inside. "What's this? Awake!" he boomed, shattering the delicate interplay. He marched straight to the blueprint, planted a foot on its edge, and launched into a ragged, powerful verse of Swanee, his arms wide as if embracing the entire, empty stage. The sheer volume vibrated in their chests. Cagney's tapping faltered, Powell's hum stopped. Jolson owned the silence he'd created. Then, like a counterpoint, a clear, soaring soprano note pierced the air. Judy Garland, eyes wide but determined, took a step forward. She met Jolson's bluster with pure, crystalline tone, weaving a harmony around his rough melody. It was tentative at first, then stronger, filling the spaces his voice left behind. Joan Blondell threw back her head and laughed, a bright, sharp sound that somehow fit the dissonant blend. "Now that's a chorus," she declared. Berkeley's eyes blazed. He snatched a piece of chalk from his pocket and dropped to his knees beside the blueprint. Ignoring the moguls, ignoring Jolson's surprised pause, ignoring everything but the vision suddenly crackling in his mind, he began sketching furiously over his own design. Not architecture now, but arrows, swirls, dynamic lines connecting Powell, Cagney, Jolson, Garland, Blondell. "The descent," he muttered, chalk screeching, "starts with a clash, then the harmony, then the fall." The mountain of money was already moving. A ripple of perfume announced the rest. Betty Grable and Doris Day slipped in, drawn by the noise. Grable's hips instinctively found the rhythm of Cagney's resumed tapping, while Day's head tilted, absorbing Garland and Jolson's duel. "My line," she murmured, stepping forward as if pulled by a string, her voice a warm, effortless ribbon weaving between Garland's purity and Jolson's grit. "Make it hum, Busby." she called over her shoulder, already singing. Jack Warner's cigar had gone out, forgotten in his hand. He stared at the blueprint transformed into a conductor's map, then at the living, breathing orchestra forming before him. Powell's tenor grounding Cagney's taps, Jolson's roar challenged by Garland's flight, Day smoothing the edges, Blondel's laugh the punctuation. Mayer's knuckles were white on his portfolio. The sheer, untamed potential vibrated in the dusty air, louder than any generator. Berkeley stood, chalk dust coating his trembling fingers. He didn't look at the moguls. His gaze swept the chaotic, glorious assembly, the stars, the singers, the dancers clustering near Toby Wing. Forget the mountain, he breathed, the command cutting through the music. We build a volcano. The blueprint lay beneath him, a battlefield now, marked for revolution. Pat O'Brien and Mickey Rooney tumbled through the door, drawn by the commotion like moths. Rooney instantly mirrored Cagney's tapping, a frantic counterpoint. O'Brien leaned in, his voice a gravelly whisper that somehow carried. And where's the fire escape, maestro? Berkeley pointed a dusty finger at the swirling chalk arrows converging on Esther Williams. Right there. She's the calm before the storm. Ricardo Cortez and Red Skelton wandered in next, Cortez smoothing his hair with a smirk, Skelton already tripping over his own feet with a clownish pratfall that drew a collective chuckle. Dan Daly and Jack Carson followed, their easy grins widening as they took in the scene. Carson nudged Daly. Think they'll let us juggle chainsaws? Daly just whistled low, eyes fixed on the unfolding spectacle. The stage crackled with a dozen energies colliding. Then, silence. Una Merkel's giggle, sharp and sudden from the doorway, broke the spell. Behind her, Guy Kibbe's gruff chuckle rumbled, Hugh Herbert did his bewildered wiggle, and Alan Jenkins fixed his deadpan stare on Warner's forgotten cigar. Frank McHugh darted forward, manic energy radiating as he snatched the chalk from Berkeley's hand. The splash, Busby. He yelped, scrawling a frantic, looping wave across the blueprint. Make it soak 'em. Zasu Pitts and Aline McMahon whispered, their eyes darting to Toby Wing's chorus sketches, while Glenda Farrell rolled hers skyward. Carmen Miranda began swaying, her samba steps a silent promise of heat. Berkeley smiled. The eruption had begun. He clapped his hands once, sharp as a gunshot. Positions. The word snapped the air taut. Stars scattered like billiard balls. Powell moved center stage, clearing his throat. Cagney claimed a corner, rolling his shoulders. Jolson planted his feet, chest out. The women formed a loose constellation, Keeler near Powell, Blondel beside Jolson, Garland hovering nervously, Williams cool near the imagined water tank. Toby Wing herded her flock of chorus girls into shimmering ranks. The moguls retreated to the shadows, Mayer clutching his portfolio tighter. Warner relit his cigar, the match hissed loud in the sudden stillness. Berkeley climbed onto a rickety wooden crate. He surveyed them, the raw power, the nervous energy, the sheer, untamed potential humming in the vast space. He pointed to the rigging high above. Silver ribbons, he declared, his voice echoing. Not wires. You fall like liquid light. His finger swept down to the chalked arrows converging on Williams. Esther, you rise from the center pool, the eye of the storm. Then, he turned to Powell and Garland. Dick, Judy, you anchor the descent. Pure tone. Unbreakable. Finally, his gaze locked onto Jolson and Cagney. Al, Jimmy, you are the earthquake. Shatter the silence. He paused, letting the weight settle. Now, let's hear the world crack open. A single Klieg light flickered on overhead, casting long, dramatic shadows. Powell took a breath, his smooth tenor note clean and steady, cutting the dusty air. Garland's soprano soared to meet it, pure and bright. Cagney's feet exploded into a furious, complex rhythm, a counterpoint on wood. Jolson threw back his head, his voice a ragged, glorious roar that seemed to shake the very foundations. And as the sounds collided, melody, rhythm, power, the chorus girls began to move, a ripple of sequins catching the light, their first step echoing like thunder in the cavernous dark. Berkeley watched, eyes blazing. The volcano was alive. Esther Williams stood poised at the edge of the chalked pool marker, her gaze fixed on the swirling chaos. As Powell's voice deepened and Garland soared higher, she raised her arms. Her dive was silent, a perfect arc slicing into the imaginary water. Berkeley's hands slashed down. Now! He shouted. The chorus surged forward, a wave of legs and glitter, their formation tightening into the first dizzying spiral around the spot where Williams had vanished. Toby Wing's voice rang out sharp over the din. Tighter. Make it breathe. High above, riggers scrambled. Silver ribbons unspooled, glinting like captured moonlight. One descended, snaking towards Judy Garland. She flinched, her voice wavering for a heartbeat before she grabbed it, her knuckles white. Berkeley pointed to the rigging. The fall begins on the crescendo. Trust the ribbon. Jack Warner's cigar glowed fiercely in the shadows as he leaned forward. Mayer's grip on his portfolio tightened. The air crackled, thick with sawdust and sweat and the raw, untamed sound of creation. Cagney's taps hammered like a heartbeat gone wild. Dot. Then, silence. The music cut off mid-bar. The dancers froze mid-step. Berkeley's chalk-dusted hand hung suspended. From the center of the spiral, where the imaginary water shimmered, a single, clear note pierced the stillness. Doris Day, unseen until now, stepped forward, her voice warm honey smoothing the jagged edges. Is this where we make it hum, Busby? She sang, effortless. The blueprint lay forgotten, trampled underfoot. The mountain had moved. The eruption was only beginning. Betty Grable's hips found Cagney's rhythm instantly, a sway that echoed through the chorus line. Mickey Rooney darted under Powell's arm, adding frantic taps that mirrored Cagney's. Like this, Jimmy. He yelled. Cagney just grinned, his pace accelerating. Al Jolson threw an arm around Pat O'Brien, pulling him into the fray. Sing, Padre. He bellowed. O'Brien's gravelly tenor joined the cacophony, a grounding force beneath the soaring sopranos. The blueprint was irrelevant now, the stage pulsed with living sound. High above, a rigger's wrench slipped. It clattered down, bouncing off a catwalk with a deafening metallic shriek. Judy Garland gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The silver ribbon meant for her swayed dangerously. Berkeley didn't flinch. His eyes snapped to the swaying rope, then to Garland's pale face. Look up, Judy. He commanded, his voice cutting through the noise. Not at the fall. At the flight. Her gaze locked onto his, wide with terror, then slowly, deliberately, lifted to the dizzying heights. A shaky breath escaped her lips. The note that followed was pure, defiant courage. Jack Warner crushed his cigar underfoot. He stepped out of the shadows, Louis B. Mayer a tense silhouette beside him. Warner's voice, low and dangerous, carried to Berkeley's crate. That budget, Busby. The one that moves mountains. He gestured at the chaotic, glorious symphony of bodies and sound. It just bought a volcano. Make it erupt. Mayer simply nodded once, face inscrutable. The first silver ribbon snaked down towards Judy Garland's outstretched, trembling hand. Esther Williams surged upward from the imaginary pool, a cascade of invisible droplets catching the Klieg light. Her timing was perfect, a sudden, fluid counterpoint to the staccato taps and soaring vocals. She extended a hand towards Garland. Trust the ribbon, kid, she called, her voice cutting through the din. Garland's fingers closed around the cool, shimmering silk. The ribbon went taut. Berkeley's chalk-dusted hand sliced the air. Descend. The chorus erupted into motion, 100 sequined legs slicing the air in perfect, dizzying unison. Their spiral tightened around Williams, a whirlpool of glittering light and synchronized motion. Toby Wing's whistle pierced the air, sharp, commanding. Hold formation. Legs higher. The dancers obeyed, their kicks becoming sharp, precise blades. Betty Grable's hips found the exact rhythm, her smile flashing as she locked eyes with Cagney's furious tapping. The stage vibrated. Al Jolson threw his head back, unleashing a raw, triumphant note that seemed to shake the rigging. Doris Day's warm harmony wrapped around it, smoothing its edges into something heartbreakingly beautiful. High above, Judy Garland began her descent, the silver ribbon carrying her like a fallen star. Her voice, pure and unwavering now, soared over the chaos, a beacon in the storm. Berkeley watched, his eyes blazing. The mountain had crumbled. The eruption was magnificent. Ricardo Cortez began a slow dance beside Betty Grable, his movements a sleek counterpoint to her rhythmic sway. Red Skelton stumbled deliberately, a pratfall that dissolved into a surprisingly graceful slide, drawing a ripple of laughter from the chorus. Dan Daly and Jack Carson exchanged a look, then launched into a soft shoe shuffle that wove effortlessly around Cagney's relentless tapping. Mickey Rooney darted between them, a spark of manic energy. The stage wasn't just moving, it was breathing. A sudden, sharp whistle cut through the sound. Toby Wing stood rigid, her finger pointing skyward. One chorus girl, a fraction behind the spiral, had faltered. The intricate pattern threatened to unravel. The girl's eyes widened in panic. Berkeley didn't shout. He simply raised a hand, palm open, a silent command to hold. The music surged, Powell's voice anchoring the chaos as the dancer found her mark, her legs snapping back into razor-sharp alignment. The spiral held. The volcano raged on. From the shadows, Jack Warner exhaled a plume of cigar smoke. Louis B. Mayer's grip on his portfolio finally relaxed, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. The air crackled, thick with sweat, sawdust, and the electric hum of something impossible taking shape. Berkeley stood motionless on his crate, a conductor surveying his living orchestra. The descent had begun. The fall was flight. The world was cracking open, note by glorious note. Al Jolson's roar met Doris Day's velvet ribbon of sound, a collision that sent shivers down spines. James Cagney's furious tapping became the bedrock, Mickey Rooney's frantic energy skittering across it like sparks. High above, Judy Garland descended, her voice unwavering, a pure silver thread against the rising tumult. The silver ribbon shimmered, catching the Klieg light as she spun slowly, gracefully, her eyes wide but fixed on the distant rafters, not the floor. Below, the chorus spiral tightened, 100 legs kicking in perfect, glittering unison around Esther Williams's poised stillness. A sudden gasp ripped through the dancers. One silver ribbon, meant for Ruby Keeler, snapped taut too soon, jerking her sideways mid-step. She stumbled, the intricate pattern fracturing like broken glass. Toby Wing's whistle died in her throat. Berkeley's hand shot up, palm flat, a silent, urgent command. Dick Powell's oinant vocal swelled, filling the sudden void, a lifeline thrown. Keeler steadied herself, found her footing, and lunged back into formation, her smile tight but determined. The spiral healed itself, seamless once more. A sharp, discordant clang shattered the rhythm. High above, a metal clamp securing Judy Garland's ribbon snapped. The silver strand went slack. Garland gasped, her descent jerking to a halt mid-air, swaying dangerously over the swirling dancers. Her voice cracked, a single, pure note fracturing into silence. Every head snapped upward. Toby Wing froze. Jack Warner's cigar dropped, smoldering on the floor. Berkeley didn't hesitate. He vaulted off the crate, his voice slicing through the stunned quiet. Riggers. Secondary pulley. Now. His eyes locked onto Garland's terrified face. Hold the note, Judy. Not the ribbon. The note. Riggers scrambled frantically along the catwalks, shadows darting against the rafters. Garland's body tensed holding onto the limp silk. She sucked in a ragged breath. Then, a low, grounding hum rose from the stage floor. Dick Powell, eyes fixed on Garland, began the melody again, steady and sure. Cagney's tapping resumed, a defiant heartbeat. One by one, the others joined, Blondell's laugh, Jolson's gruff undertone, Day's warm harmony, building a net of sound beneath her. Garland closed her eyes. When she opened them, a fierce determination had replaced the fear. Her voice soared out, clear and strong, just as the secondary pulley engaged with a metallic thunk. The ribbon snapped taut. The descent resumed. The eruption hadn't faltered, it had found a deeper resonance. Esther Williams watched from the center of the spiral, her gaze calculating. As Garland neared the imaginary pool, Williams raised her arms. Now, Ruby, she called. Ruby Keeler lunged forward, her steps precise and powerful, leading a flank of chorus girls in a sudden, dazzling fan kick that framed the descending star. The movement was so sharp, so synchronized, it drew a collective gasp. Toby Wing's whistle approved, sharp and satisfied. The fractured moment was gone, replaced by a choreography more intricate, more daring than before. Berkeley's chalked arrows were long forgotten, the living blueprint was writing itself. High above, the riggers worked frantically, securing clamps, their shadows darting like frantic stagehands in a storm. Below, the chaos coalesced. Mickey Rooney's taps became punctuation marks to Cagney's rhythm. Pat O'Brien's gravelly voice anchored Jolson's bombast. Carmen Miranda's vibrant samba steps infected the chorus, adding a burst of tropical heat. Dan Daly and Jack Carson's soft shoe wove through it all, a thread of effortless cool. The stage vibrated with a dozen energies, yet somehow, impossibly, held together by the sheer force of will and talent. Jack Warner bent to retrieve his cigar, a slow, deliberate movement. He didn't relight it. He just watched. Berkeley stood amidst the controlled frenzy, his hands no longer trembling. They were steady, conductor's hands shaping the storm. He watched Garland's feet finally touch the chalked mark beside Williams, her voice merging seamlessly with Powell's. He saw the moguls in the shadows, Mayer's portfolio now held loosely, Warner's unlit cigar forgotten. The silver ribbons glinted, the dancers moved like liquid light, the music swelled, a living, breathing spectacle forged in the crucible of near disaster. He raised both arms, palms open to the soaring sound. The volcano wasn't just erupting, it was singing. A ripple of movement caught his eye. Guy Kibbe and Hugh Herbert shuffled near the backdrop, their presence a grounding counterpoint. Kibbe's gruff chortle rumbled beneath Jolson's next verse, while Herbert's bewildered twitching somehow synced with Skelton's next stumble. Frank McHugh darted past, snatching a discarded prop hat and plopping it on Alan Jenkins' head mid-deadpan stare. Jenkins didn't flinch, but a flicker of something, amusement, crossed his face. Zasu Pitts and Aline McMahon whispered urgently to Glenda Farrell, who finally cracked a reluctant smile. The corners were filling, the tapestry complete. Berkeley didn't direct them, he simply absorbed their energy, letting it fuel the fire. Then, silence again. Deliberate this time. The music faded to a single, sustained note from Powell. The dancers froze, limbs extended, sequins catching the light like frozen sparks. Even Cagney's restless foot stilled. Berkeley stepped forward, his voice a low command that carried to the rafters. Hold it. He walked among them, a sculptor inspecting his work. He adjusted Ruby Keeler's outstretched arm a fraction higher. He tapped Jack Carson's shoulder, signaling a subtle shift in stance. He paused before Judy Garland, meeting her wide, exhilarated eyes. He didn't speak. He simply nodded. The trust was absolute now. He returned to his crate, the silence thick with anticipation. He looked at Toby Wing, at the studio heads, at the constellation of stars holding their breath. A slow, fierce smile spread across his face. Now, he said, the word dropping into the stillness like a stone into a pond. The deluge. Powell's note swelled. Cagney's foot exploded. The chorus surged. The silver ribbons lifted. The volcano erupted anew, not just with sound and motion, but with the unstoppable force of a dream realized. The mountain was gone. Only the spectacle remained, dazzling and unforgettable. High above, the Klieg lights blazed to full intensity, bathing the stage in a blinding, golden-white glare. The sequins on the chorus girls' costumes exploded into 1,000 points of light, creating a shimmering halo around the descending stars. Judy Garland's voice, pure and unwavering, soared above the renewed cacophony, a beacon cutting through the glorious noise. Esther Williams raised her arms, a silent signal, and the spiral formation dissolved into a cascading waterfall of dancers, their legs kicking in perfect, glittering unison as they flowed towards the imaginary pool. The air vibrated with the thundering rhythm of taps, the raw power of voices, the rustle of silk, and the collective gasp of awe from the shadows where the moguls stood transfixed. Busby Berkeley watched, his eyes narrowed against the glare, absorbing every detail, the precise arc of Ruby Keeler's fan kick, the effortless sway of Betty Grable's hips locking with Cagney's furious tempo, the way Doris Day's warm harmony wrapped around Jolson's bluster-like velvet. He saw the supporting players. Frank McHugh's manic energy infecting Hugh Herbert's woo-woo exclamations, Guy Kibbe's quips grounding Pat O'Brien's bravado. Carmen Miranda's vibrant samba in her outlandish costume brightened the mood on the stage. The blueprint was Ash. The living, breathing, dazzling spectacle before him was the only truth that mattered. It was bigger than gold diggers. It was everything. A single, silver ribbon, catching the light just so,